Up next is a dear friend and an extraordinary individual. Her name is Emma Brandy. She's a community builder. She brings people together around shared interests in land mindfulness. This would include music, food, and shared interests around land-based identity. She's passionate about our food systems, and she brings fresh fruits and vegetables, eggs to the local community of the families and members of her immediate environments. She educates them about source, about the energy it takes to produce food, and to help them embrace the food roots of the place that we live in and how we are connected to those producers. Her most powerful experience in canoeing was at Camp Kearney, her very first multi-day trip as a junior leadership course. At 15, Emma first really understood this experience. It was really her first aha moment. She appreciates the opportunity that lake travel provides to explore her self-powered movement through these places. She next hopes to take a gentle paddle and hiking trip through Killarney, with me, I hope. And when I asked her, she said, "I believe canoeing is like moving meditation." A canoe trip journey, so she'll be presenting on a canoe trip journey that, in hindsight, has changed the trajectory of her life. It propelled her into her master's program. There, she was prompted to write about her personal experiences and turn these narratives into research form. It is through her research journey that Emma could then re-understand the culture of that canoe trip. Please help me welcome Emma.
This works. Forward, back. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yippee. All right, so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Erica, for the introduction. I'll try to stand just outside of here because I fear that you might not be able to see me because I'm so short. So I must admit, I've been here before, but not for the symposium. I've actually stood on that stage. I was probably in some sort of can-can outfit. It was for a dance recital, and I was 11, so it's exciting to be back and to be an adult here, sharing something that I'm really passionate about. So I must admit, I'm not really a recreational canoeist in the traditional sense of the term, nor am I an expert of the North, so you won't be hearing about high Arctic journeys from me. I'm also not your typical outdoor educator, instructor, or guide. I love canoeing and I cherish wilderness experiences, yet my time's not always filled, or my extra time is not always filled with outdoor adventure or teaching. Most of the time it's filled with phone calls, emails, personal things and exercise and some writing. So you're probably wondering how I fit in here. When I first spoke to Alex, I was actually kind of nervous. I don't know if he knows that. But with that nervous energy came the upswelling of inspiration around canoe journeys. Yay, it worked. I started telling him about how a specific canoe journey inspired me to leap across the Atlantic Ocean and in pursuit of my postgraduate learning, and how my research evolved into a poetic and literary investigation of myself. This investigation of self involved rigorous introspection as well as extensive extrospection. Yet it all came down to finding a way to articulate my life experience with academic elegance. I think this love of canoe journeys and a desire to understand them more deeply and share that with others is how I fit in here. So today I'd like to share with you stories of moments of inspiration from canoe journeys that have led me to this moment right now. I'd also like to offer you an introduction to a research approach that inspired me to share my story, and it continues to inspire me to this day. And so to tell these stories, I need to go back in time just a little bit. So I grew up in the East End of Toronto, not too far from here, and went to a small elementary school. And in grade 6, my teachers took me to the Scarborough Outdoor Education School, also known as Camp Kearney. If you don't know Kearney, it's located about 3.5 hours north. That's probably the only time you'll hear north in this session. It's located 3.5 hours north of Toronto on 400 hectares of pristine land. And after my school trip, I continued to go there as a camper. SOAS became my second home, and it's located just north of Huntsville, quite close to Algonquin Park. So I became too old to be a camper, And so I transitioned to being a counselor. I just couldn't get enough of that place. And so over my time at Kearney, I learned the idea and practice of canoe tripping. And it's there that I learned my basic skills and taught others how to journey in the wilderness as well. We went on canoe trips to Mattawa, to Temagami, to the French River, and sometimes Algonquin Park. And so at that time, I didn't imagine that I would pursue a path where canoeing would constantly be my focus as well as my inspiration. At the time, I could have never foreseen myself standing here speaking to all of you. So I took a break from working at Kearney in 2009. It was the summer after my second year of school. I was studying kinesiology at McMaster in Hamilton. And my scientific brain was telling me that I had had enough of this summer identity. I thought of being at camp as only the summer self, that it couldn't be transitioned into the rest of the year. And so I stayed in Toronto and made a big decision to go on my first ever personal canoe trip with friends and family. Now, on this trip, I wasn't a camper, I wasn't a leader, I was just tripping, period. It kind of revolutionized my whole world because I felt refreshed and I felt this vigor and I felt free. So I went into my next year of schooling with this freshness and a new inspiration for outdoor experiences. I even decided in that year that I would take a course called Foundations of Outdoor and Experiential Education. These were all pretty new words to me at the time. And while the rest of my peers were delving deeper into the functions of the cardiac valves and studying the physiology of high-performance athletes, I started understanding that there could be a hidden curriculum in traditional schooling, or perhaps that experiential education in the outdoors could be a unique way to empower young people. So this course, I ate up all the material that my professor, Bob Henderson, who a lot of you probably know, I ate it all up. I felt giddy, I felt inspired, I was this new person beginning to form. So at the beginning of my final year of my undergrad, I took another course with Bob called, believe it or not, summer camp, and I was finally going back to summer camp, yes. So we embarked on a 5-day, I know, pretty short, 5-day loop in the Temagami region, and starting from Maskinonge Lake. And so only this time I was a participant, I wasn't a camper, I wasn't a leader, and I also wasn't on a personal trip with friends. There was something pretty unique that I felt about this journey, but I didn't know what it was. But I felt, once on that trip, I felt that familiar sense of community and freedom, and it evoked feelings of being at camp. But something in me changed. This canoe trip not only imprinted upon my identity, it seemed to shift the trajectory of my actions afterwards. The words heart song and passion crept into my awareness, and they were linked with this canoe journey. I felt so inspired and so impacted by this trip that I knew something was going to change once I got back home. And it did. So I got back to school and back to reality, and the spark didn't fade. I became increasingly motivated to learn more about outdoor education and to understand the essence behind this motivation. I was so inspired that out of the blue, I decided to approach Bob and ask him if he had any suggestions for how I could pursue postgraduate work in outdoor education. Now, I wasn't one of those people that ran to my professor's office hours all the time, so I was actually quite nervous because I also didn't really like talking to them about plans for my future. That was intimidating. So it was at this time that Bob let me in on what I believe to be one of the best kept secrets in the world. It's a master's program in outdoor education at the University of Edinburgh. I think I literally jumped out of my seat at this point because I was excited and totally afraid that if I applied, that I was going. So this conversation marked the beginning of what I think was the biggest personal journey of my life so far. I know I have a relatively short life so far, but it's the biggest one to this date. So that's me. Needless to say, I went to the University the University of Edinburgh and pursued my master's in 2011. I made that journey by boat as well, but wasn't quite like paddling a canoe. That's another story, you can ask me about it later. That involved 7 nights at sea with my mom, a lot of reading, some ballroom dancing, and a lot of ocean gazing. So at this point, I feel like I've given you a good picture of what sort of toolkit I had going to Scotland. My toolkit had some introductory theoretical knowledge in it and some years of experiential substance from canoeing in it. But I don't think anything could really prepare me for what sorts of learning opportunities I would be exposed to when in Scotland and what sorts of experiences I would be having. I know for sure that I could never have anticipated knowing that I was going to write my thesis on the story that I've just introduced you all to. So the process of getting to know my research method was a hairy one, but it was also a valuable one.